All right, let's talk about this whole Apple FBI thing. I've written a couple things about it. I have a couple more that I'm working on. I will probably write more in the future because it's kind of a big deal. And it's, I don't think either side actually is helping things, because I feel like they're both Apple and the FBI, and those who support Apple and those who support the FBI are sort of conflating and confusing what exactly is being asked for and why. Actually, let me first talk real quick. I got an email this morning from someone. I'm not familiar with him, so I can't say how much he does or doesn't know about security or encryption or biometrics or anything else. But I wanted to address it because the point of the email is that he wanted to share his expert opinion on but again, I don't know, expert opinion on biometrics, and basically saying that he feels that sort of peripheral to the Apple FBI debate is this the idea that we have fingerprint scanners on the iPhones, and we have facial recognition on Windows 10, some Windows 10 devices. There's some facial recognition on some Samsung Android phones. There's fingerprint scanners on those. And what this person said, and he's not the first person to say this, is that he claims these biometric authentication methods are essentially trivial. They're essentially not protecting anything, because you could. He implies that breaking the facial recognition would be as simple as having a HD picture on my phone that I could hold up, and if I had a picture of you, I could open your phone using that picture. And then same thing with fingerprint scanning, in terms of how difficult is it to get an image of someone's fingerprint and unlock something in that way. Those what's the word I'm looking for? Those assertions, whatever, are somewhat valid against older technologies. I think when Samsung first introduced, I think it was Samsung. Anyway, the first time my son had an Android phone that had facial recognition, I actually tested that and was able to open his phone using a picture of him from my iPhone. So that is a valid concern for some facial recognition. And there are weaker and stronger ways to do the fingerprint scanning too, so it is a valid concern depending on your fingerprint scanning technology. I don't really feel like it's a serious concern with today's technology, with the proper technology. If you go look at my video that I did a few months ago demonstrating the Windows 10, the Windows Hello facial recognition, the Windows Hello facial recognition is awesome, like mind-blowingly awesome. And it is able to log me in before I can blink. All I have to do is look at the camera and boom, I'm logged in. Even in the dark, because it's not really looking at a picture of my face. And if you hold a picture up to my Surface Pro 4, you will not log in as me. The facial recognition is much, much smarter than that. And Microsoft, well, not Microsoft, but experts in the field have actually tested it with identical twins. And even an identical twin was unable to log in on the twin's profile. That's how accurate that facial recognition is. And again, it's not really looking at a picture of your face. Then that's why you can't trick it with a picture. It's looking at a lot of different factors about your face that make you you. So, are there devices out there that use facial recognition that would be trivial to crack? Absolutely. Does that mean that facial recognition itself is an invalid form of authentication? No. Same thing goes with the fingerprints. when Apple first introduced Touch ID and added the fingerprint sensor, there was a group of hackers who, very quickly proved that it was possible to create a fake fingerprint from somebody and access the device. And the headlines at the time, the breathless, oh my God, the sky is falling, Apple's fingerprint scanner is insecure. Headlines made it sound like this was a trivial thing, and so basically the fingerprint scanning was worthless as a security control. When the reality is, that, it was a very convoluted method. I mean, it wasn't rocket science, but it also wasn't easy. And I think for the vast majority of the population, not a concern. I mean, nobody wants to get into my iPhone bad enough to go through all the hoops required to copy my fingerprint and get into my iPhone. It's that simple. So I guess I reject the premise of this person's email that biometrics in and of themselves are insecure. And, there was a larger implication to the email that, this was some sort of Big Brother conspiracy, that if the government could convince us all to use biometrics, then they wouldn't even have to go through this whole Apple FBI legal battle. They would just be able to copy your fingerprint and copy your, get an imprint of your face and open whatever they want. And to some extent, that is actually true. If the iPhone in question from the San Bernardino shooter was an iPhone 5S, an iPhone 6, something that has Touch ID, they wouldn't actually have to do any of this. They could go to the corpse of the shooter and use his fingerprint to open the device, theoretically. Of course, that assumes that he's even got the fingerprints entered into the device in the first place, and there's a lot of unknowns there. Which sort of brings me. So now let's go into the Apple versus FBI case. The confusing and conflating part is that when Tim Cook did his interview on ABC News, he talked a lot about the cancer it would be if Apple were to backdoor. I think they even used the terms backdoor. But if Apple were to do this for the FBI and help them gain access to this phone, how that would make all of the rest of us iPhone users and iPad users in the world less secure. And to me, that's misleading. The idea of an encryption backdoor is something the government wants. It is something that intelligence agencies and law enforcement agencies would love to have. A lot of them would love to have just a magic key that they could just decrypt whatever and get through your encryption, if it's part of an investigation and whatever. That isn't actually what's being asked for in this case, though. In this case, they have the device. The device actually belongs to the county government because the shooter was an employee of the county. The county has actually given permission to access the device, but because the FBI screwed up and changed the iCloud password, now they can't get into the device. They can't get access to the data on the device without actually having the PIN to access the phone. There's a feature in iOS that says if somebody enters the incorrect passcode 10 times, erase the phone. Just wipe the whole thing clean to protect the data that's on it. And there's also limitations on how you can enter the passcode, in that you have to actually enter it on the phone. You have to actually use your finger on the glass as it stands. So my understanding of what the FBI is asking Apple to do is they're asking Apple to write a custom version of iOS that they would then force update the shooter's iPhone, and that custom version of iOS would disable the feature or remove the feature that will wipe the phone out after 10 incorrect passcode attempts. And it would also allow them to programmatically enter the PIN codes. So rather than having to have an FBI agent sit there and try every possible combination, by hand, you could just connect it up to a computer and have a computer program that just runs through every possible PIN combination until you crack it. That is what they're asking for, as I understand it. But also, as I understand it, the request is in fact limited to this phone. This request is in fact limited to this phone. The update that would be written would be specific to this phone. It would require, part of the reason that they need Apple at all to do this is in order to do this update, in order to get the iPhone to accept the update, it has to be signed, digitally signed by Apple. So it's a verifiable Apple update, and connect with Apple servers. Again, as I understand it. So the update would be specific to this device. The concern in this case is not the same as the concern of the encryption backdoor. That's a whole different story. If you build an encryption backdoor, that is just ridiculously stupid. The Pentagon gets hacked all the time. The director of the CIA gets hacked. The intelligence agencies that are supposed to be doing these investigations and that want to have access and want this encryption backdoor can't protect their own stuff. And if the encryption backdoor exists, the bad guys can find it. Enemy nations can find it. So there's no way to create that encryption backdoor and guarantee that it won't just become public domain and be, traded on the dark web and everyone will have access to everything. It will basically nullify all encryption. And I've actually raised the question in an article a few months ago about what that would mean from a compliance perspective, because when you look at like Sarbanes-Oxley, Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, HIPAA, PCI DSS, there are requirements in there to protect data, and compliance frameworks by definition are not specific in terms of exactly what you have to do in most cases. They're more general because they don't want to paint themselves into a corner based on today's technology. So it's more like they want to give you a broad guidelines, but give you the freedom to adapt those based on the current technology. But encryption is implied in a number of those compliance requirements, and data protection is mandated. So I'm curious if, in fact, the government ever succeeded in forcing companies to build an encryption backdoor, how it is that companies could be compliant or what that would mean for compliance. Because if I'm General Motors and I'm using Microsoft Windows and the government has directed Microsoft to build a backdoor into the encryption, I can no longer say for sure that my data is protected because the government has weakened it by intentionally. But again, that's a huge digression from the current events. The reason I'm opposed to Apple doing this for the FBI, and the reason I think that the FBI will ultimately lose this in court, is it sets a precedent that the FBI can come back and ask for the next iPhone, the next iPhone, the next iPhone, the next Android phone. Once there's a legal precedent on the books that says the government, in the interests of national security, is allowed to compel a company to create a custom version of its product for the government, that's the precedent. And anytime that comes up again, whether and it doesn't have to just be smartphones or tablets or computers, it could be any product with any company. It the government would just have this sort of unlimited authority. Basically you can just attach in the name of national security to any request, and the government can do what it wants. And I am not a big brother conspiracy theorist. I am not anti-government. I'm not really afraid of my government per se. But I do believe in the Constitution. I believe in the rule of law. I believe that we have these rules in place. Whether it's First Amendment, Second Amendment, Fourth Amendment, they've worked effectively, over hundreds of years. And I don't think that we should just toss them out in the name of national security over what I consider to be an irrational fear of terrorism. Not that I think that terrorism won't happen or can't happen. I think it will happen. But the reason I think it's an irrational fear is bad things happen all the time, that we don't toss out the Constitution over. Bad things happen all the time that we don't invade other countries over. Bad things happen all the time that we don't, have the entire government, go nuts trying to, fix the problem, so to speak. So terrorism might happen, but it doesn't mean that law enforcement or intelligence agencies get to be above the law in the interest of national security, my opinion. To me, for Apple to do what the FBI is asking them to do is similar to, or a step toward, socialism from the respect of, I'm not sure if it's socialism, but it's a government takeover of private industry. Now it might be limited to those things that they can throw under the umbrella of national security, but basically if the government can do that and just call it national security and direct private enterprise to work on behalf of the government, that's kind of a government takeover of private industry. So I don't know. That is my 2 cents on that issue. I definitely am on Apple's side. I definitely think that the FBI is overstepping its legal authority in asking Apple to do what it is asking Apple to do, and that it would set a precedent that would be hard to undo, and would be dangerous for the country as a whole. So I would much rather take my chances with whatever information may or may not be on this iPhone than to set a precedent that the FBI wants to set. So that's just my 2 cents. But again, what is at stake is different than the encryption backdoor. That's a whole separate conversation and a whole separate discussion, which is still out there. I mean, the government would still like to push for that, and that is also still a horrible idea. But it's not the same thing that's being asked for right now. And then just to close up with what really prompted this whole video rant, which is this email I got about biometrics and biometrics being some sort of big brother conspiracy to destroy privacy and biometrics being insecure by nature. Like I said, I don't agree with that. I do think that the Windows Hello facial recognition is very secure. I think that the fingerprint scanner on my iPhone is relatively secure, and I don't think that that's a government conspiracy to break my privacy. So that's all I've got for today. Take care.